Thank you very much for staying. Welcome back to the marketplace. Now, moving on, government is expected to extend its program with the IMF. This is what Joy Business has picked from some sources close to government and also the IMF. The program should be ending in April 2018, but it now looks like it may go beyond that date. George Riafe has more.
The likely extension, sources say, has been influenced by the previous administration's inability to achieve the deficit target and implement key structural reform measures under the program. Joy Business understands the current state of the program requires the IMF to recalibrate the entire program targets again to ensure some sort of consistency with the new administration's economic priorities. Sources say even though government wants to conclude the program as scheduled, the IMF is now insisting the program should be extended. The fund is even threatening not to go to the board for approval for fourth review cash if government does not agree to a program extension. It argues looking at all the measures that needs to be implemented, it might not be possible to complete the program as scheduled. There are fears if government pushes ahead and implements all these measures, it could affect the economy. A development that could force managers to extend the program. Another development that would influence government's move is the signal it will send to investors if it goes ahead to end the program in April 2018. This is because some investors have argued being under the program ensures some sort of fiscal prudence. Finance Minister Ken Ofori-Atta at a recent press briefing insisted that government is committed to ending the program in April 2018. Despite the expected cost.
Meanwhile, Senior Minister Yao Safo Mafo says any program extension will not affect the economy and government's policy direction.
Do we really have to complete the program? That's the question you should ask. We are exaggerating this. The IMF has a 3-year extended program with the government starting April 2015, ending April 2018. We came and said we are continuing to the end of the program. The IMF itself supervised the deterioration of the indicators. How do you expect a deficit of 3% and you end up with 8.7 cash and 10.2 on commitment? So I told the IMF that they were poor supervisors because most of the statements they issued after their visits to Ghana indicated that we were on the right path, but we were not. And therefore, you cannot try to meet all the indicators in 6 months. How?
And therefore, you think the program should be extended to December 2018?
No, we think that we should continue the program to the end, to April. If we see, in fact, there's no difference between April 2018, and please listen to this part very carefully. IMF programs are measured in budget cycles. Our next budget is in November 2017, written for end of December 2018. So that whole 2018 budget will be under the supervision of IMF. And therefore, whatever is to be seen up to end of December, I don't see any problem with it. So extending the program to end of December or any in April 2018 is neither here nor there. It's much ado about nothing. You are within that budget cycle.
Away from the IMF, now doing some industrial relations issues, and the Trades Union Congress TUC is making a fresh case for government to regulate lending rates in the financial services sector to bring down the cost of borrowing for businesses. Now, this is coming at a time when businesses continue to lament the impact of the high cost of credit on their operations. There's more in this report.
According to the TUC, regulating lending rates is one of the best ways government can prove its commitment to empower the private sector in creating jobs in the economy. Analysts have, however, emphasized only market forces should determine the direction of lending rates. But the Secretary General of the TUC, Dr. Anthony Yao says governments can directly and indirectly influence things.
There is nowhere in the world where only market forces determine rates.
So to what extent can government influence? Well, yes,
to a very great extent.
Yes, the T-bill rates, they can influence, but that's not the only factor, even though, yes...
Let me tell you, government is government. They use regulations and policies to achieve their goals, either directly or indirectly. Government can indirectly influence interest rates. If government decides that we are going to be fiscally disciplined according to the new law, and we are going to cap our borrowing, I can tell you all those monies will be freed to the other private sector people to work with. So indirectly, government has a huge influence on interest rates in this country. If government wants to go the regulation way, they can say that, look, we think it's unfair that somebody deposits money with you and you pay the person a deposit rate of 10% and you charge 40% when you lend the money. It's not fair, so we are going to cap it. You can charge any interest rate you want, but the difference between deposit rates and interest rate should not be below 5 percentage points. You'll see they will bring things down themselves.
Dr. Ba also challenged assertions that regulation of lending rates by government will be virtually impossible because of the free market nature of the economy.
This is a mixed economy, and there are regulations. Even in America and elsewhere where they have practiced free market for a long time, there are social interventions to make sure the market failures are addressed. If you want to go by this, you run an abnormal economy where interest rate is 70% and so on. In the non-financial institutions, do you know some are charging more than 100% interest rate? This is usury. This is not the way you manage an economy. Economies must be managed. When there is high inflation, something is done to check it. In the same manner, if there is high interest rate, government should do something to check it.
Latest data reveals that the average base rate charged by banks as at February was 26.9%, a drop of 0.7% from the figure recorded from the month of January.
Now, the president's announcement that the government is seeking a review of the terms of the Millennium Challenge Corporation has not gone down well with staff of the ECG of Ghana. The Public Utility Workers Union, PU, which represents the interest of workers, is not impressed. General Secretary Michael Adumata Nyantechi, who has been leading the ECG workers' opposition to the concession agreement, questioned why there was no dialogue with them before government went ahead to renegotiate the deal.
And we are very much disappointed in the sense that the president has indicated during the State of the Nation address, and this was re-echoed by the Minister of Finance when he presented the budget to Parliament, that there will be a dialogue on this issue between Labour, MIDA and ECG before any firm position is announced. But here we are hearing this kind of statements when we haven't had any such dialogue. So is it that the president, what he said about the dialogue, he didn't mean it, or he's just taking workers for granted? We think that it is important that all stakeholders sit around and discuss, and then we come to certain consensus. We are not saying that as workers, without us, government cannot take decision. No, but what we are saying is that we must be involved, and there are key issues that we need to discuss before we come to certain conclusions concerning this compact.
All right, so Michael Adumata Nyantechi was sharing those thoughts at the May Day celebrations at the Independence Square here in Accra. But let's go further to this particular development, and we have energy stakeholder Ishmael Ejokumhene of KITES, that's the Kumasi Institute of Energy, of Trans Technology and Energy, on the line to share some thoughts on this particular issue. Good afternoon, sir. Welcome to Marketplace.
Good afternoon.
Now, there's been this back and forth. I mean, especially when several platforms, government has assured that there will be no job losses. It looks like ECG staff, or PU for that matter, is not still in tune with this particular development. What's your take on that?
Well, anytime you find the private sector coming into the public sector space, you know what that means. Typically, the private sector prefers to operate with a leaner human resources than the public sector, whose prime motivation is not usually profit maximization, but in most cases it's sometimes job creation as well. So it is to be expected that once you have a private sector participation, private sector actor taking over the operations of a utility for up to 20 years or 25 years, in terms of efficiency, some jobs will be lost. So the reassurances and the assurances probably is still not convincing enough. So I guess that's where the private, the pool is coming from. But what the president didn't say yesterday, and I wish somebody asked him to clarify that, is whether or not the no job losses is still for a period, a moratorium of 5 years, or is for the entire duration of the concession. If it's for 5 years, then it's still the same as the previous administration managed to secure with the potential concessionaire. So I think that's where the apprehension is coming from, is to be expected from labor unions, but the private sector doesn't really care about just creating jobs, but they want to be profitable.
All right, now, Ishmael, you are an energy expert. What would be a perfect deal to be negotiated on behalf of these ECG staff and the government as a whole?
I'm not sure there is a lot more room for renegotiation, but if there were to be some renegotiation, I think I sincerely believe that whoever is coming as a concessionaire wouldn't want to be working with people they don't need. I think what they need to negotiate to ensure that no one is worse off. If they're going to be, ultimately, they're going to be severance, the packages should be good enough. But whether or not the concessionaire would want to work with a large labor force if they don't need that I'm not sure any concessionaire will be able to guarantee. We only need to make sure that workers' interests are protected. That's if they end up losing their jobs. But also, we need to make sure that whatever agreement we sign with the concessionaire, even on the side of the performance, we don't allow them to get away with any cheap deal, but we hold them to strict accountability and make sure they deliver, because the distribution sector certainly will have to get better than it is at the moment.
All right, now we're always talking about our side, that's government and ECG staff. Have we taken into consideration the investors? I mean, the concessionaires, do they have also an interest in this particular development?
Exactly. They are not coming in because they like Ghana. Nobody is going to take up a responsibility for 20 years because they want to help you. No. They have their interest, and that's mainly to make some returns on their investment. So clearly, they wouldn't want to accept any overly large labor force. And the bottom line is that we don't also want to put ourselves in a situation where these people will come and then they won't deliver and they'll tell us that because you forced me to keep more people than I need. So in terms of looking at the outside of the equation, they definitely would want to be as efficient as possible. So if they need 10 people to work, they wouldn't want to employ 15 people, and that's clear. But of course, they should know what we are putting on the table before they come in. If we insist that nobody loses their job, then either they take it or leave it.
Now, pool has come once and again that, I mean, they have not been included in the negotiations. I mean, over and over again, government has assured of their interest at heart. Now, do you think that they have a case at all?
I think as for pool, nobody should question whether they have a case or not, because that's, as labor union, that's what they exist to do, quite frankly.
Yeah, but because I know they have been invited on several platforms to make inputs into this deal. And
exactly. So that's what I'm saying. As for labor unions, you don't expect anything differently from them. Even if nobody were to lose their job, and they will still have issues with anybody coming around their space. So I expect that to happen. But I think the fact of the matter is that I'm not too sure there is too much room for renegotiation so that everybody will come back to the table. I think that period went as long ago when Parliament finally ratified the deal. So I'm not surprised whatever renegotiation didn't involve pool, because there is no negotiation table as far as I'm concerned. So that probably explains why nobody was invited. I mean, in terms of when they were cutting this new deal, if indeed the deal has been cut, why nobody was around the table. I understand when the vice president was in the U.S., that's when some of those discussions went on. So pool can only be present if they were also part of the government delegation that went to the U.S. So, I mean, I share in their concerns, but I think it's late in the day.
Okay, so are you saying that beyond the ratification or the approval by Parliament, there is no way out again afterwards?
I think so. I don't know whether you've heard what the minority leader is trying to say. I mean, I think he's saying essentially the same thing, and I had held the same view before even I heard him speaking. You see, let's understand this. Nobody forces a compact on us, even if the Americans may have their own interests.
Okay.
They allowed us to pretty much define what we want out of this compact. And after several years of consultation, we said we wanted them to help us with power. So the power, after needs assessment, they said that, okay, let's look at the distribution, because that's what appears to be the major stumbling block. And then this thing has gone through a lot of discussions, and Parliament actually has ratified. So I think it's either going to be everything or nothing for the Americans. If anything is going to change, they probably will call this thing off, unless if it's not too late. I've heard the American ambassador saying that there's nothing to be renegotiated. I think for the government side, we can talk to them and get them to understand that we mitigate whatever the adverse effects are going to be. But Emmanuel, don't let us forget why we are where we are today. Look, I like to explain this concession thing this way. I'm the owner of the utility. I need to make massive investments in the utility.
Sure.
Previously, I used to borrow money on concessionary terms from the IMF and from the World Bank and things like that.
Exactly.
Those facilities are no longer available, so I increasingly have to go to borrow in the capital market, which is getting more and more expensive. Meanwhile, my assets, the utility, needs some massive capital injection. If I don't have the money, I either sell it off or I ask somebody to come and help me. And those people, when they come in, they are not coming in as for the Christmas. So if we have money to do our own utility, let's forget about the compact. Okay. But if we don't have money and it's going to continue to be like government still borrowing, then something has to happen. And they've looked at the spectrum of options, the menu of options, which of course include concessions. Elsewhere and in some sectors, we've actually sold off assets. This time around, we're still going to retain ownership.
Okay.
If this is going to be the best deal, let's push it through and make sure that we minimize the adverse effect. But ECG needs a lot of investment. People have talked about government owing them. How much is government owing them? The last check is around $500 million. What ECG needs is way beyond that. They need sustained investment for 5 years. That is going to translate to something like $5 billion. Where are we going to get that money from? So I seriously sympathize with the unions. Anybody who loses their job in this era, there are no jobs. But I believe these people have been trained so much that, I mean, whoever is coming in cannot do without them. Of course, most of the systems are going to be, we're going to have a lot of smarting of the grid so that less and less labor will be required if the concessionaire comes in. But the truth of the matter is that in all this discussion, let's ask ourselves, why are we even talking about concession? We have a problem with the distribution utility. I know they don't accept that all the blame is theirs, but we can't run away from the fact that we still have both technical and non-technical losses in excess of 20%. Okay. And then you still don't have enough tariffs to recover, to invest. How do you run the utility? They say government should put money in there. I'm not sure the government has the money. Yeah, so let's continue to talk about this.
Sure, rightly said. But finally, before you go, I would like to know your thoughts on this issue of government raising 15-year bond on the capital market internationally to pay outrightly for the energy sector debt. What's your take on that?
That debt is actually killing, and if we don't address that, we will very soon see some of the local banks collapsing. So if we are not raising those bonds through our noses and it's actually thought through it and we're going to get value for money, I think the energy sector, the legacy debt will have to be taken off the books as quickly as possible.
Right.
But at least we have the energy sector levy, which is also doing a fantastic job. If you look at how much money we brought in 2016, I think if we maintain it and we manage it properly, we should be able to clear off all those debt. But let's make sure that it doesn't become another HIPIC where we got all our debts forgiven, but within a short period of time, we piled up the debts again.
All right. Thank you very much, Ishmael Jokumhene, for those thoughts. Ishmael Jokumhene is the Executive Director of the Kumasi Institute of Technology and Environment, KITE. He's been sharing his thoughts on the new direction by the Public Utility Workers Union, who are saying that government did not involve them in the renegotiated deal of the ECG concessionaire. Now, it's all on the marketplace. And moving on, mine workers across the country have added their voices to calls for government to go to the rescue of Ghanaian businesses in China following reports of maltreatment against them. The development is allegedly in response to the Ghana government's renewed aggressive fight against illegal mining activities, which some Chinese are engaged in. Now, the General Secretary of the Mine Workers, Prince William Ankra, spoke with Joy Business after a press conference on the situation held on May Day.
This is a sovereign nation, and we don't need anybody to call the bluff. And so we can use diplomacy, but we're very blunt with them that we cannot tolerate that rubbish, because this is a nation that laws must work. You can't go and do that in China. So beyond the diplomacy, excuse me, I think that we've got to be very tough on them. And we want to make sure that a nation that's struggling to keep our purse, spend money where it should be spent, we're careful that we don't entertain this diplomacy to really affect us. So for me, if they're doing the wrong thing, we'll flag them out. The government will be very strong on that, and I think that that's the way to go. I would say it's quite interesting, and it's unfortunate that we're talking about it this time around. We mentioned this 20 years ago. We are at the forefront of making sure that this menace is dealt with from the right perspective. However, it's good that it's been tackled with the seriousness that it deserves. I expect the president to be very bold and make sure that, look, if this can even cost him his political career, he will ever be the president that his name will be in the history of our nation. And I think eventually, I've listened to him. I'm proud of his impetus. He needs ministers and MCs and DC who support him. And we as a nation must support him. And in the event that everything gets well, they become a platform for to make sure we give him a nod, because Galamsey is a major threat to our nation.
What is the claim that some of your members are aware of some of these guys who are doing these Galamsey operations, and they are sometimes fronting for them?
Well, I have no idea, because the last came mine, that's still more organized manner. If they do, the security guys will not spare them. So please don't let us get to the issue about the main issue about what we see in the public domain, where water bodies are being messed up, and for them, the need for it to nip in the bag. So primarily, if they do it, the system will deal with them. But the issue is that we all see what happening in the public domain, which is very, very important. Water bodies are really being put in a very, very bad shape. We spend more money, and we think as a nation with a very lean pace, we are careful.
Let's now cross over to the downstream petroleum sector, and oil marketing companies have given government a 48-hour ultimatum to stop activities of illegal field operators or risk thereof. Now, according to the companies, the threat has been influenced by the inability of the National Petroleum Authority, NPA, to act on their concerns. They maintained that after almost a year after engaging the authority, it has still failed to stop firms that get tax reliefs for exporting fuel to neighboring countries and later end up selling it on the local market at a cheaper price. Now, the development, they say, could lead to the closure of some oil marketing companies and bring about more layoffs in the industry by end of this month. Kweku Ajimandria is the association coordinator of the OOCs.
What we want is, we want government to solve the problem. When it solves the problem, it helps all of us. Government will not lose revenue, our business will be intact, we're not going to lay people off, and that's what we expect. So 48 hours we are given, it's ultimatum we are given. And if 48 hours, we know between now and the 48 hours, there will be a lot of talk, discussion. Petrol is sold in such a way that it's not like somebody is coming to buy 1 liter, then you switch your system on. No, this is supposed to be running. So if the bottom line is you are not getting the volume, how do you meet your cost? You cannot make it, let alone paying you employees.
Could we see some service stations? I mean, some have said that they've had to virtually close some service stations because of what is happening? Closure is also something that has affected you badly.
Badly. If you go to the north, you see a lot of stations which are dry. I personally travel to Western region and some other places, water region as well. You see them sleeping. The power attendants were sleeping. In fact, if you happen to be at the station trying to buy fuel, it's like a miracle. Why should it be like that? Meanwhile, in this country, nobody has complained of shortage of fuel. So where's the fuel going? Where is it coming from? You know, that's where we're coming from. They keep on assuring. They have been doing that. And the chief executive, Hassan Tabore, has met me. We've met several times. And all is assuring. We're doing this. Last time they were at the port. But assurance does not give you solution to your problem. That's where we are coming from. We can't continue to bid time on this. We can't. So we need a bigger ask, like the government coming forcibly on those perpetrators. Then obviously we can get somewhere.
And on that note, we draw the curtain down on this afternoon's edition of The Marketplace. Many thanks for your company, and do come again tomorrow afternoon for another edition. My name is Emmanuel Poachi. Have a good afternoon.